morning, everyone, and welcome to a day-long session of discussions and debates on recovering from COVID-19, small businesses coming back to life. We have four panel discussions of about an hour each, moderated by Madan Padaki and Mekin Maheshwari. They're going to talk about different issues with regard to the mindset of resilience, ecosystem partnerships, and funding and government policy initiatives, which are very important in bringing the country back from the clutches of COVID-19. So to kick off the discussion, I'm going to invite Ravi Venkatesan to make some opening remarks. It's my honor and personal delight to introduce Ravi, who is the founder of GAME, Global Alliance of Mass Entrepreneurship. He was earlier on the boards of Infosys and Bank of Baroda, earlier the chairman of Microsoft India and Cummins India. So Ravi, please set the stage and tell us what's ahead of us. Thank you.
I'd like to start by adding to your welcome to this online discussion on how small businesses can not only survive the crisis, but emerge stronger from it. Now, I think not since the Second World War has the world been through a crisis as deep and as wide and pervasive as what we're going through. And we're still very much in the early stages of this unfolding saga. And so as a result, there was still more uncertainty and more questions than answers. And the obvious questions are, how long will this last? How will we come out of it? When will the economy begin to recover and so forth? And right now, there are lots of opinions and guesses, but really no conclusive answers to this. And my own conviction based on past experiences and crises is when you're going through something like this, it's better to assume and plan for the worst and still hope for the best. So my guess is that it might take another year before the economy begins to recover in a significant way. So how are businesses expected to survive through this long, dry period? Now, governments everywhere are struggling with this issue. They have a tough challenge because governments have to walk that razor's edge balance between saving lives and saving livelihoods. Now, few countries have embraced a shutdown that is as tough as ours, but it has been necessary in order to save lives. Nobody has the same population and density, the same lack of discipline, and combination of a weak public health system. And so this was essential. But the economic consequences of this are enormous. And I think we're still seeing just the tip of the iceberg. And the bulk of the economic cost is borne by fragile stakeholders. Businesses everywhere, big and small, are challenged. In fact, recently I received a report from a stockbroker which showed the cash balance of many large companies and the rate at which they are burning and how many months of cash they have. And it's astonishing to see even really big brands have 2 months, 3 months of cash at the outside. SMEs are far more fragile because they operate with smaller reserves, 10, 15 days. And therefore, and the shutdown has already lasted 3 weeks and probably will last 2 weeks, if not longer. So I talk about the risk of a mass extinction. There are credible estimates that say 25% of our SMEs in India will not be able to reopen. They won't survive. And depending on the length of the shutdown, the duration of it, and what measures we take collectively, not just the government, that number could be far, far, far higher. So, of course, many small and large entrepreneurs alike are taking important and necessary steps to stay alive. So, for instance, in our conversations with many small entrepreneurs, I think we see that everybody recognizes the importance of cash. If you run out of cash, game over. And so they're doing what it takes to, crank down expenses and hoard cash. Many are becoming quite creative and trying to collect their receivables and advances from some good customers. It's not easy, but it is possible. We're seeing tremendous amount of innovation in some entrepreneurs who are trying to find new things to produce or new ways to go to market. The mandis are shut. Let's not just rely on traditional routes to market. Let's go direct to customers in cities. We've been having discussions with Seva, which is saying, look, many of our self-help groups which are producing crafts, they're going to have no demand for at least a year, if not longer. What else could they be producing, whether it's masks or soap or hospital gowns? So everybody's trying to survive, and it's necessary, but not sufficient. So we need to also think about what can we do collectively to throw a lifeline to some of these businesses. In the last 3 weeks, all of us at GAME have been having conversations with lots and lots of stakeholders, small and micro entrepreneurs, business, government and government agencies, banks and other lending companies, foundations, entrepreneur support organizations like the ASRA and Syngenta Foundation and others. And what we've come to conclude is there are probably 4 major themes or ideas that we need to work on collectively. And those 4 themes form the basis of today's panel discussions. One of them is liquidity. Say what you will, that remains at the top of the list. Now, of course, we're all waiting with bated breath for the government to announce its next economic package, this time aimed at businesses, particularly, we hope, the vulnerable small and medium business segment. But we cannot wait. So a number of organizations, we've come together to try and create a $100 million, what we call SME Stabilization Fund. It's nothing but a loan facility where we are able to quickly grant the most eligible and deserving organizations small working capital augmentation loans of anywhere from 20 to 50,000 rupees at low interest. And so a number of philanthropic organizations as well as commercial organizations are coming together to try and create such a facility. And that includes foundations like Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, Omidyar Network, Rockefeller, and so on, but also organizations like SIDBI, Northern Arc, etc. Now, we've still got some distance before we can put this fund together. But I want to point out that it is a drop in the ocean of need, but a very important drop. What we are hoping to be able to do is demonstrate that we can successfully do this. And that provides a model then for others to replicate similar loan facilities, or else for us to begin to crowd in larger pools of capital, particularly capital from development finance institutions like CDC and IFC and so forth. So this is the topic of one of the sessions, and it's an important one. The second important idea that has emerged is that we need to put in place support networks for SMEs in every state and every district. So today is Monday, April the 13th, and we're going live with an experiment in Karnataka to create such a SME support network in partnership with the government of Karnataka. The idea is to set up a helpline that anyone can call into with their issues. And the issues can range from, look, I have some perishable produce. I even have a customer in Bangalore, but I don't know how to get it there. Or it can be what government schemes and programs are there that I'm not aware of and should be availing. Or it can be, look, I'm so desperate, I'm ready to end it all. So how do you refer them to, a counselor or some other intervention? So what the government is proposing to do is appoint nodal officers in every district who can attend to these issues, backed by a support network of organizations like Hak Darshak, Deasra, and other individual subject matter experts. We don't know how well this is going to work, but we think it's an important idea that we must make work. And once it's successful, we hope that other states might be interested in this. One of the things we've realized in conversations through the last 3 weeks is, in the midst of this crisis, there are lots of ideas, lots of solutions, lots of leaders and organizations trying to do good work. But many of them are working in silos. And that's not going to really solve the problem of this scale. What we need to do is create collectives so that we can learn from each other, we can problem solve collaboratively and take solutions to scale. So we've got a whole session on this subject. How do we create small entrepreneur support networks? The third idea, which is the subject of a third discussion, is where are the future opportunities? This crisis, like every crisis before this will come to an end. The world will continue, but it's likely to be a world that is somewhat or considerably different than the pre-COVID world. Every crisis, as you know, does have opportunities as well. So how can we get some of our small entrepreneurs and medium entrepreneurs to start understanding where these future opportunities are and start swimming towards them? I believe there are enormous opportunities, and the panel undoubtedly will point to even more. Food, for instance, we think is a giant opportunity. I'm personally very, very bullish about India's manufacturing prospects. That's my roots. I spent 16 years building diesel engines, and I'm still very passionate. Lately, we've been looking at what does India import from China and other countries. And it's staggering. We don't just import complicated things like 5G equipment and turbines. We import a whole host of really mundane things like Rakhis and Ganesh idols and plastic things and toys, things we used to make perfectly well till the early 2000s until we signed up to WTO. So there's a giant opportunity for manufacturing these things again and becoming competitive at it, in which case there's also an export opportunity. Let us be mindful of something many people are calling out, that this COVID crisis is also causing a trade reset between the US and China and between Europe and China. And many countries are going to want to bring back manufacturing and jobs to their own countries. But they're also creating an opportunity for India to step into that breach. And there are lots and lots of things that we could manufacturing and exporting. But again, people are spending too much time looking at the government. The leadership has to come from entrepreneurs who need to look at these opportunities and find ways to tap into them. And then, of course, we can come together and go to the government and ask for policies and incentives to make sure that we're competitive. So anyway, there's important discussion on future opportunities. And finally, there is a session, the concluding session on evangelizing the small and medium enterprise and the small and medium entrepreneur. Problem with SMEs is a large number of them are not just small, they're also informal. And they're scattered across the length and breadth of our country. And therefore, their voice is not always heard. It's always the big guys whose voice is heard. So how do we capture the voice of our small and medium enterprises? How do we speak with one voice, constructively, clearly, particularly when we're speaking to the government, state government, central government, for interventions that are necessary and important for the health of this sector? How do we learn from each other, right? There's lots and lots of success stories which are emerging. So one of the things that GAME is doing is organizing a series of webinars every day for the next 60 days, including today, where we showcase entrepreneurs and what they're doing to survive and flourish, bringing in experts and so on. This is hugely important. And we're very grateful to partners like Your Story and Facebook and Josh Talks for helping put this together. So all these sessions are incredibly urgent and important. I hope all the participants find it useful. I want to end with a hopeful story from science. You know, as a young child, I was always fascinated, like every child is, with the story of dinosaurs. Who are these huge creatures? How did they become so big? And why did they die so suddenly? We know the answer to that. So it turns out in evolutionary biology, there is this phenomenon called punctuated equilibrium, which means what? The world is stable for long periods of time and life flourishes. And then there is some sudden event. It could be climate change, like an ice age, or asteroid hitting the Earth, destroying everything. And in these periods of very abrupt short change, most animals and plants are unable to adapt quickly and they become extinct, like the dinosaurs. But a few are able to somehow survive. And then after the crisis, they flourish and become the dominant species. So when the asteroid hit the Earth 65 million years ago, 99.99% of all living things died in the next 100 years. But amongst the survivors was a tenacious rat-like animal, which turned out to be the ancestor of all mammals and us. And after the dust settled, so to speak, and mammals became the dominant species. So Charles Darwin, who the father of evolutionary biology, says, in nature, it is neither the biggest nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And that's important to remember at this moment, that the ones who are going to survive and flourish are those who are tenacious and resilient, and the ones who are most able to adapt to a very different future and go after these opportunities. And I hope many of the entrepreneurs on this call are amongst not just the survivors, but the leaders of the future. So thanks again to our partners, Facebook and Your Story, for today's sessions, and all the experts who've so kindly agreed to make time for this. I wish you a fantastic conversation.